Okay, this lesson is going to be all about chemical reactions and what they are, how they work, what the parts of them are. So we're going to start looking more closely at how all these chemical reactions work. So the first question, of course, is what is a chemical reaction? And from what we've talked about in class before, we can say, well, it's a reaction in which something new is created. So you start with a certain substance or two, and you have a chemical reaction, and when you're finished you have something new. So anytime that you have a reaction and you end up with a new product would be a chemical reaction. So if you think about your life, you probably see chemical reactions all the time. In your notebook, see if you can list as many as you can. I want to see at least 3 in there. An example would be like baking a cake. Here I started with my ingredients and I put it in the oven and I came out with something new, big chocolate yummy cake. All right, so there's one. See if you can come up with at least 2 more examples of chemical reactions that you've seen in your life. Evidence of a chemical reaction. There's 5 different ways that you know a chemical reaction is happening. And if you couldn't think of any examples to write in your notebook before this slide, this might help you get that figured out. So how do we know that a chemical reaction is happening? What do we look for that tells us, yep, this is a chemical reaction, it's producing something new? Well, one would be gas production. So if you put some chemicals together in class and you see bubbles forming, that tells you that there's gas production. That gas wasn't there before and it is there now, so that must be a new product that you're seeing. So that gas production will tell you that something new is being created or a chemical reaction is happening. Another piece of evidence would be an odor. So you put a couple of chemicals together and all of a sudden you smell something new that wasn't there before. That would be evidence of a reaction because, again, the odor wasn't there and it is now, which means there must be a new substance being produced. You might see a color change. So you put 2 chemicals together and they turn bright pink. That tells you that there is a chemical reaction happening. That one's usually pretty easy to see. An example of this would be if you put iodine on any carbohydrate like a potato or anything, rice, any of that, you will see that it will turn black, and that tells you right away there's a color change, there's a chemical reaction happening between the iodine and the potato. You might have a precipitate, which is a fancy word for a solid form. And you'll see this, usually it looks like kind of like the substance thickens and there's like usually white pieces that form in your reaction. Sometimes there are other colors, but a lot of times little white pieces of solid will form, and that will tell you again that you have a chemical reaction happening. The last one, you have an energy change. So if you put a couple chemicals together and they start giving off heat, that will tell you that there's a chemical reaction happening. Or if you put 2 chemicals together and you start to feel that it's cold, that tells you that there's a chemical reaction happening. Examples of this, you're playing in a basketball game and you hurt yourself and your coach grabs an ice pack. They crack the ice pack, which mixes the 2 chemicals inside together, and pretty soon it starts to feel cold. That tells you that chemical reaction is happening in there. Also, the opposite of that, if you do a lot of winter sports, you can get little hand warmers. Again, you shake those up, mixing the chemicals inside, and that chemical reaction produces heat. So you know there's a chemical reaction happening because of the heat being produced. So we have evidence of chemical reactions. As chemists, we need to be able to write down what's happening in that chemical reaction. And the way that we do that is through these things called chemical equations. In the equation, there's a couple different parts. Now, in your notes, I would write down these parts at the bottom of your page where you see that this stuff fits. And also, I would color code them and label on your example. You have this example in your notebook as well. So as we do the parts, we're going to write what they are up here and we're going to label it on the example here. Make sure you do that in your notebook. And color helps to distinguish between the different parts. So, first part, in a chemical equation, you have the reactants. And the reactants are the chemicals that we start with, the things that we're going to react together. And those are always found to the left of this arrow. See the arrow there? So we have 2 reactants in this case. We have hydrogen and we have oxygen. So those are our 2 chemicals that we're going to mix together in this chemical reaction. Okay, any of the chemicals that are found to the left of that arrow are the reactants. So you can write this down, maybe write it in red or any color that you'd like, and then label this in the same color to show that that's where the reactants are found in this example. Another part of a chemical equation is the products. And products are the new things that were produced. So they are found after this arrow. So in this case, there's just one product, H2O. Okay, again, write down products in a color and label them on this picture in the same color so you can see where it fits. The arrow that I keep mentioning is also a really important part of a chemical equation. The arrow I have here in green, and that means that a reaction is taking place. So you have your reactants, the chemicals you start with, then you have a reaction taking place, and that produces something new, your products, which are over here. Okay. The other thing that you'll see in chemical equations is plus signs, and we have that in orange here. So basically what the plus sign does is just separates different chemicals. So we know that H2 is separate from O2. They're two different chemicals. We put a plus sign in between. And that plus sign just means that we're going to react them together. So if I was going to read this chemical equation to you, I would say hydrogen reacts with oxygen to produce water. Okay, so you have the names of the chemicals, hydrogen, oxygen, and water. And then when you see that plus sign, that means reacts with. And this arrow in a word reading of this means that it's producing new things. So hydrogen reacts with oxygen to produce water. Okay, on your chemical equations practice sheet, you're going to have some practice in writing out these chemical equations based on the words that are given to you. All right, so grab that next for your notebook, and if you get stuck, of course, let me know.